Welcome everyone, Costin here with a discussion about the worst race in Total War Warhammer 3, Immortal Empires, by far and away. In fact, they are so bad that they're not even worth putting on other lists because they're way worse than any other race in the game. And of course, I'm talking about demons. And when I say demons, I'm not just talking about the demon prince, I'm talking about all of the demonic races for the various gods. I'm talking about Nurgle, Slaanesh, Tzeentch, Khorne, and of course Undivided. They're all pretty bad in their own way. And I'm gonna go over the legendary lords from N'Kari to Skarbrand to Kairos to Kugath, and of course the demon prince, to talk about what makes them so really bad in the game at the moment. Now, at number 4, starting out with the best of the Daemons of Chaos, is N'Kari. N'Kari actually has a lot of potential in their campaign. Unfortunately, N'Kari also has significant drawbacks as well. So what's the potential? What are the good things when it comes to a N'Kari campaign? Well, Slaaneshi Corruption, if you're using it, generates extra income and control for buildings. And you also get pleasurable acts that give you either significant economic benefits, growth benefits, control benefits. So that's all well and good. So you can take control of territory and use it and actually take advantage of it and have a pretty decent economy while doing so. Your main economic building gives you up to 200 income, but that doubles, or rather it gives up to 300 income, but that doubles if your control is below 50. So if you manage that correctly, you can have a pretty decent amount of money from the campaign, and you can increase this even further with opulent antiquity. Though this, of course, is going to create its own issues. There can be some issues. Is like if control is negative, it's control -6. So there's always downsides with Slaanesh. On top of that, N'Kari also has vassalization from subjugation, direct subjugation. So over here I've taken Crix's capital, and I'm just going to auto-resolve this. And I can subjugate them, and subjugating a faction will also give you a significant amount of devotees. So this is turn 800 devotees. That is actually quite a bit of devotees, and it will really help me out during the course of my campaign. However, there are downsides, of course, when it comes to it. Some races are resistant to your attempts at vassalization. So they do have, to a certain degree, a kind of resistance to it. Specifically, like if we look at Crix over here, like there is racial resistance. So you can vassalize a faction through subjugation, or you can vassalize them through outright diplomacy, or you can build seductive influence with a faction using cults, though some are resistant to it, in order to force vassalization on a faction. So you're the kind of faction, you have the largest available number of options when it comes to vassalizations, because you've got subjugation, you've got seductive influence, and of course you have regular diplomatic choices when it comes to it. That's good. And that's all well and good when it comes to playing N'Kari. And there's a lot of power to be had when it comes to that economic power, campaign power, because if you can get a lot of vassals, like if I can get Alariel as a vassal and Tyrion as a vassal, then that is a significant amount of campaign power. However, the road to doing so will certainly not be an easy one. And of course, vassals are never going to be as powerful as the real thing. But what's the issue in N'Kari? The major issue. Well, N'Kari has really no way of increasing casualty replenishment. As you can see, casualty replenishment for N'Kari's units is pretty weak. The only thing N'Kari can do to increase casualty replenishment is to go with this particular chain over here, but even then it's only going to be 9%. Some factions may get an 8% by default with just a hero. You don't have a hero, and the structure that does give you casualty replenishment won't give you enough. And so this means that if you're playing this campaign, you're going to be fighting a lot of battles manually. On top of that, your units, and this is where it gets worse, this is where it gets really worse, because not only do you have poor casualty replenishment, N'Kari's units as well, many of them have very low armor. There are some exceptions, of course. So like one of the things I would strongly recommend for people to do that are trying to play this campaign, if you want to torture yourself, it is getting Forsaken of Slaanesh. Because they do have high leadership and armor and pretty decent melee stats, so they can do the job that you need them to do. They can make a decent army, but it's never gonna be more than just having a decent army. Therein lies the problem with N'Kari. Now, furthermore, N'Kari does have one particular mechanic, or rather two mechanics, with regards to the cult. So the cult can give you various benefits when it comes to faction, like seductive influence, cultist capacity, so you can get hero capacity, and you can also use devotees to summon a disciple army. Now, this disciple army over here, the strength that it has will depend on your strength, and normally you wouldn't summon it here, you would move all the way to the border, and when you're about to move into Katik, you would summon it then. But this kind of disciple army, although it can certainly be really powerful, and because if you subjugate a lot of factions, you will certainly have a great deal of devotees. The problem is, this disciple army will take attrition in an area that doesn't have a very significant amount of Slaaneshi corruption. So its use is pretty limited. I mean, they're better in some ways than the Blood Host that Skarbrand uses, because no upkeep. But on the other hand, the attrition that these guys take can be a significant problem. And ultimately, they're still Slaaneshi units, so they're low armor units that will take significant casualties in any particular battle. So there's a problem when it comes to N'Kari. You do, however, have the benefit of a decent economy. I wouldn't say it's a good economy, because a good economy is what the Greenskins have, what the High Elves have, what the Dark Elves have, what the Vampire Counts have. You don't have a great economy, you have a decent economy. And you can run around with multiple armies, each of these armies can summon a disciple army. So you can have a ridiculous amount of power in this campaign. So this campaign actually does have scaling when it comes to the campaign situation. The problem is the battles and the tortured experience that you're going to have actually fighting those battles. It's not just against the High Elves, though the High Elves certainly are going to do very well because of all their range power, but against everyone. Having units with low armor and having poor casualty replenishment, it is a death blow for any particular faction in the game. And N'Kari certainly is one of the worst when it comes to that. And number 3, in terms of the individual Chaos Gods, we have Khorne and Skarbrand the Exiled, who decided the brilliant idea was to listen to Tzeentch and try and backstab Khorne. Honestly, if I was Khorne, I would have been pissed off that he listened to Tzeentch more so than anything else. But anyway, Skarbrand is overhyped as a legendary lord, to say the least. A lot of people think, oh, he's so great, he can win the campaign faster than anyone else. No, he actually cannot, because having one good army does not make a good campaign. But let's talk about this. So Skarbrand, when we're looking at his faction effects, he does have that downside of diplomatic relations with Khornate factions. That doesn't really matter. He gets replenishment for all his armies in foreign territory, and whenever one of his armies raises a settlement, it gains 15% campaign movement range. That's pretty solid. And then you combine it with Skarbrand's baseline effect of getting 25% campaign movement range after winning a battle. So that's 40% campaign movement range, and he can also recruit units for a minus 35% cost in enemy or raised territory. And also, if you're playing as Skarbrand, you have the ability for all your armies to switch to a demonic portal stance that will give you immunity to most attrition, as well as replenishment and access to global recruitment pool. That is pretty solid, because you don't have to spend you don't really have to spend any real amount of movement points when it comes to that. I mean, you do have to spend a bit, maybe, but you actually don't when it comes down to it. So you get 40% campaign movement range if you're winning a battle and raising a settlement at the same time. But this gets also increased to 50% if we're talking about Restless Fury, and then 65% with the Locus of Endless War. If you're leveling Skarbrand, what you want to do is get a point in Room Archer, get a point in Inspiring Present, get 3 points in under Skull Takers or Bloodsoaked Champions, and then stop, wait until you get to level 13, so you can unlock this entire skill line all in one go. There's a good amount of benefits from that. But here's the thing. Here's the thing about Scarbrand's situation. His army is good, but it's not exceptional. Bloodletters in particular, they're probably one of the best, if not the best, melee infantry unit. Certainly their exalted version is the best melee infantry unit in a one-on-one infantry fight. But they don't necessarily have the very best armor, though they do have 20% physical resistance. But Bloodletters can take a lot of damage, in particular from ranged units. Whereas Warriors of Chaos, Chaos Warriors of Khorne, may take substantially more damage from any kind of unit because they have 110 armor. So I would argue that Chaos Warriors of Khorne are actually the better unit to use throughout your campaign. Though you can't recruit them from the start, you instead need to get the structure because you start with the portal. So you can recruit Bloodletters. I would get rid of the structure, get an economic building instead over there, and when it comes down to it, get this, level up the structure so you can get access to a cultist. Unlike N'Kari, you actually do have good casualty replenishment. So you have casualty replenishment in foreign territory. By default, it's better than what N'Kari has. And you can get the cultist hero, Cultist of Khorne, which will also give you casualty replenishment. Now let's talk a bit about the issues of Scarbrand's campaign. With battle difficulty on easy, I'm just going to go fight this particular, just how to resolve this particular battle. You can get a pretty good amount of money from the post-battle loot or from sacking settlements. I'm going to need to enable the Route Marcher over here and should be able to just about reach it. Nope. Okay, so I'm going to need to do a bit of a trick over here. Call in the Eternal War, which summons an army. This summons an army, replenishes Scarbrand's movement range, which will allow me in turn to reach that settlement. Now, here's the thing about your post-battle options. If you're playing Scarbrand, the main way of getting money is sacking settlements. The problem is, if you're sacking a settlement, then you can't raise it. Now, you have two options when it comes to raising a settlement. You can either get skulls for the Skull Throne, or you can summon a Blood Host. Now, a Blood Host is a temporary army, basically. It's an army that cannot replenish. It can have some really powerful units. It can have Bloodthirsters, some of the best units that you can imagine in this Khorne roster, but it is a temporary army. It does get campaign movement range. It does get a minus 50% upkeep, though it does require upkeep. And none of the units can replenish. And it also has a timer on it. That makes it, while this timer is still active, you're immune to Bloodthirst attrition. When that timer expires, you're going to start, this army is going to start taking a significant amount of damage, which is obviously not an ideal situation for you to be dealing with during the course of your campaign. Now, there's a lot of power from the Blood Host, but this is what makes the campaign a miserable experience, because these Blood Host armies cannot replenish. So if you're fighting a campaign as Scarbrand, you're going to need to fight a ridiculous amount of manual battles, probably some of the highest in the game, at least if you care about the Blood Hosts, because the main benefit of this campaign is not whatever armies you can recruit, it's rather what Blood Hosts you can summon. You want to get the full stack, ideally, on Scarbrand, so you can get really powerful Blood Host armies and unleash them. But of course, you're always going to have that tension between sacking a settlement for tens of thousands of gold, potentially, or getting 1,000 skulls, or raising, or getting 1,000 skulls from raising it, or getting a Blood Host. There's always going to be that tension. And then there's the issue of occupying territory as Scarbrand. A faction that just raises everything in their way is not a faction that's going to conquer the world. You need territory, because although your economy is really weak and really pathetic, you can barely earn any kind of income from the buildings you have. Although your income is really weak and pathetic, you still do have an economy and you still need territory. Now, the way they decide to deal with the situation of you raising territory is that they give you a chance to automatically colonize ruined regions. You get a 5% chance by default, and you can also get another 5% chance through spread rage, so you can get it up to 10%. And eventually you can take over territory. The problem, of course, with that is that other factions may take that territory as well. The other issue is that recruiting for Scarbrand is a very expensive endeavor. Just like by default, if we look at this, by default, a Bloodletter is 1,400. A Marauder of Chaos, 1,000 if you're using dual weapon. A regular Marauder, 765. And it's not like their upkeep is so very low. It is not. So in this campaign, you're constantly going to be running out of money. You may have quite a lot of turns where you're just barely one step away from being bankrupt at the end of the turn. Therein lies the issue of this campaign. You do have a really good, powerful army that does have good replenishment. If you stack this up with Chaos Warriors, which it will take 3 turns to be able to start recruiting those. If you stack this army with Chaos Warriors, it will be a good army. However, you won't have any other army that compares to what Skarbrand has, so it means your campaign potential is limited. Now sure, if you have a lot of settlements grouped together, like for instance the Blightwater or the Eastern Badlands, you could possibly take over 2, maybe even 3 provinces, provided you use this Eternal War on Holy Manifestation in a different way than what I did there. You could take over like 2, maybe even 3 entire provinces, because you could start here from Misty Mountain, make your way through these settlements, and just raise everything to the ground in a single turn, getting skulls, building blood hosts. Of course, the issue that you're going to encounter is if you want to take these capitals, taking any settlement costs 2,500 skulls. You should only use that for provincial capitals. So if you want to build an empire so you can afford more armies, get more troops, all that, you're going to have to always you're always going to have to balance out between getting blood hosts, getting skulls, and occupying territory. And of course, adding the sacking element to it. You don't really face rebellions as Skarbrand, even the idea itself of it is a hilarity. But you do have a poor economy. Buildings take a long time to construct. It takes a long time to resettle regions. And I feel like the underlying mechanics of like this tension between taking settlements, sacking them, raising them for skulls or blood hosts is not a great one. And here's the thing, a lot of people will argue Skarbrand can win the campaign faster than anyone else because he can build a massive powerful Doomstack on his own and take a lot of territory faster than other people. That is not necessarily true. Winning a campaign requires ultimately taking 272 settlements. While you can certainly do it very quickly as Skarbrand, like over here in this particular campaign, I've achieved the long campaign victory condition by turn 46, and I'm more than halfway done with the actual campaign victory condition. And I've burned most of Ulfuan to the ground, taken on Tyrion and Alariel. Although you can certainly do it. One, this campaign, while the turns might not seem long, it will actually take longer than the vast majority of campaigns you will play in this game, of any other race. Because in order to really fully utilize this race, you need to fight a lot of battles manually. So that's time. That's a lot of hours poured into it in order to take advantage of the campaign mechanics of this particular race. To give you guys a contrast over here, this is a campaign turn 66. I have all of Ulfuan, Nagorond, and even most of Norsca under here as Tyrion, though the expansion in Norsca is very slow because Chaos Wasteland. But I'm at the point in this particular campaign that I've been playing where I've achieved, the only things that I haven't achieved in terms of long campaign victory conditions is to wipe out Akarf and to wipe out Lokir, just because I need to go on the other side of the world. But 2 Doomstacks under Alif Anar, 2 Doomstacks under Tyrion to deal with Akarf, it's gonna be done. And that campaign will be won and sorted. And I didn't have to go through the tortured experience of having to fight a lot of these battles manually, or playing a campaign where I'm constantly running out of money. And to be clear, Tyrion is not the best when it comes to it. There are many campaigns. Like if you want to play a campaign where you're just going from battle to battle to battle, or you have a lot of battles in a single turn, Tarax is a better choice because he actually has a better army, better campaign mechanics, better brace in a lot of ways than what the demons have to offer. Or if you want to play with the demons of Khorne, Valkia is a substantially better choice. Yes, she doesn't have the same kind of campaign movement range as Skarbrand, but she can take territory. She doesn't have these silly, ridiculous mechanics that Skarbrand has to deal with. She has many of the same benefits. She doesn't have blood hosts, fair enough, but she can gain some campaign movement range when it comes to winning battles, absolutely. She doesn't have the power of the Bloodhosts, but Bloodhosts honestly are just a miserable experience because you need to basically treat them as precious diamonds of armies because you don't want them to take any damage in the many inconsequential battles, the garrison battles in particular. You want to save them up for the proper battles. Like, for instance, here, if I was going to go north, I might ally Quake, or I might wipe him out. If I'm going to wipe him out, I would want to save the Bloodhost for fighting him. Same with Carrick 8 Peaks over here. I would want to save the Bloodhost to just throw them all at Carrick 8 Peaks, or to throw them at Forgrim over here in the north. So, this campaign has a lot of drawbacks. I understand why it has an appeal for certain people. Personally, I think the idea of having to fight a lot of battles manually in a campaign that are inconsequential, that you know you're going to win with ease, is not fun at all, and the mechanics themselves are pretty crap. If you want to play a race that can conquer the map on legendary, very hard difficulty very quickly, as I said, Taurox is a good choice, Valkia is a good choice, hell, Skaven are a good choice. Skaven are a good choice. Warriors of Chaos, any legendary lord of Warriors of Chaos will do that trick. Even Nakari, I'd argue, can do it better. Sure, Nakari might have a slower start, but once Nakari gets going, she gets going, or he gets going, whatever. Skarbrand is just a one-man doomstack with one really powerful army, and every other army is inconsequential. Any other army you build with him, if you can even afford it, is never going to reach the power level of Skarbrand. Therein lies the problem. You can achieve a lot with this one army, but you won't achieve so much on a campaign level that other factions can't do, like the Greenskins, Vampire Counts, Warriors of Chaos, and other races as well. And number 2, we have Kairos Fateweaver, who looked at Nakari and said, "Oh, you have poor casualty replenishment? Don't worry, I have even worse casualty replenishment." I suppose the idea was that units in actual battles have barriers that can regenerate, so we're just going to give Kairos really poor casualty replenishment to recover from any losses that they do suffer in battle. And it does lead to a pretty bad and miserable experience. You do have a degree of power over here, of course. You can get grimoires, you can use the change of ways for various little trolling tricks like taking over settlements, revealing faction intentions, forcing wars, all that kind of stuff. So there is a degree of power in this campaign, and Kairos himself is an incredibly good magical user that can also swap between certain spells over here, certain schools of magic that you use in the campaign. Now you can go metal, you can go death, you can go fire. You have a great deal of flexibility during the course of this campaign when it comes to the magic that you're actually using. A great deal of power with it. All well and good. The problem is replenishment. Really, it just comes down to that one factor. It is just replenishment. You don't have a structure that gives you casualty replenishment. You have a structure that gives you barrier replenishment, which, yeah, it's even worse than a Nakari situation. Your economy can be decent, but it's never going to be as strong as one Nakari has to offer. And as for your army roster, you have short-ranged units that aren't really great. You do have some choices, some good choices over here, but your baseline range units over here, not really that good. My personal advice, if you're going to play Kairos, is to go for this tribute, the Many-Eye tribute, and yeah, get Forsaken. Because they're going to be pretty durable, they're going to have better stats, they're going to have a lot of armor, so they'll survive quite a lot of damage on the campaign map, and just continuously improve this until you get chosen. That's the way to do it. But of course, you're always going to have economic issues when it comes to this particular campaign, because all of these campaigns were designed around the idea that they would have like 1 or 2 armies during the course of their campaign. So it isn't a great campaign experience to be dealing with Kairos. None of the demonic factions were especially great even in the base game, but Kairos certainly suffers a lot from the transition to Immortal Empires. It's also just a really boring campaign. You might win every battle with minimal casualties because of the barrier situation. You can just keep going, and none of the other factions, including Teclis over here, or even Oxyatl all the way over here to the west, will really be able to stop you. Though, to be fair, Oxyatl will give you a hell of a battle. Let's be clear on this, but they won't be able to stop you. but it's just a really boring, dreadful experience. In general, any campaign in the Chaos Waste can give you a lot of opportunities and power, but let's be real, it's also fairly boring, long distances to cover, not many opponents, not many interesting decisions to be made. So you can conquer the entirety of this part of the world without any real opposition and go smack Tyrion in the face, and then go deal with Oxyatl. And then you have flexibility during the course of your campaign that you can go for. Because you do need to wipe out Tyrion, the last defenders, the Lizardmen of the South and Tyrion basically. And then you need to wipe out Kugaf. So you do have a set path over here, but you don't necessarily need to follow it. You could go all the way for Lustra if you so desire, if you want to conquer Lustra, if you want to get involved against all of the Lizardmen factions, you have that opportunity. Or you can fight over here in the south. But yeah, the issue is just like having a poor army composition, and units just don't work very well right now. Like units with very low armor, short range are not going to be great units. Like the problem with the blue horrors and the pink horrors, they're really, really bad in a siege battle. Guess what you're going to have in any campaign that you're playing of Immortal Empires? A lot of siege battles. So it isn't a great campaign experience to be dealing with if you're playing as Kairos. And the poor casualty replenishment means that even if you set the difficulty to easy in terms of battle, you're still going to take significant losses that you won't easily recover from. So for instance, over here, on easy, if I just auto-resolve these battles and even replenish, go with the replenish option, you can see how much damage I'll start taking over here that I won't really be able to recover from all that easily. Like my Chaos Knights of Siege have taken quite a lot of HP damage over there, and will be difficult for me to recover from that. Because the replenishment is basically non-existent. Which, yes, it is an issue. A major issue in this campaign. And number one, in terms of the Monogod factions, we have Kugaf the Plague Father. Nurgle has three things going for them. Good growth, good casualty replenishment, and the plagues, which give you quite a few options on the campaign map, giving you either buffs or debuffs against the enemies. So there are some significant benefits when it comes down to it. Some of these stuff do require you to get research done in order to unlock it, but there are certainly benefits when it comes to the Plague Cauldron. And there's always benefits in having good casualty replenishment with any particular faction. Though to be fair, the casualty replenishment aspect about it is not necessarily that you have such amazing baseline casualty replenishment, though you do start with a hero that does give you some, and you also have an Unholy Manifestation that gives you 20% casualty replenishment for 2 turns, so your army can't move. Here are the issues with playing Nurgle. The units themselves are not especially great. Low armor, low leadership, weak melee stats in general, so they'll take a lot of damage. You might be able to recover from the damage, but it does certainly make your army weaker in a battle. They're also slow, very slow. So this is a very slow moving army that the ranged army will just annihilate even before you reach their lines, and it's not like you have such a great starting position to be able to build up a massive empire and unleash the strengths of Nurgles, the Plague, the many demonic units. Because there is certainly some strength when it comes to Nurgle, but there's a reason why this is the worst of the Monogod factions on this list. So, the unit roster itself is pretty weak. Kugaf is not a great legendary lord in combat, and his campaign benefits, while they're certainly decent, they're not really all that great either. I mean, he does have a fairly lengthy skill tree over here, and he certainly can benefit from having a lot of Nurglings. He can also replenish units. He can have a decent amount of combat power, but it's never going to be great combat power, and his campaign benefits are also not necessarily going to be that significant. But here's the other issue. As opposed to just having a weak roster units, it's also how you recruit them. So most factions just recruit units regularly, right? With the Warriors of Chaos, there is a chance of adding a unit to a poll, all that stuff. If you're playing as Nurgle, you need structures, and the way the structures work for Nurgle is different than any other faction in the game. So you have the cycle of life and death, and what happens is you build a structure at tier 1, and it's gonna start going to tier 2, tier 3, all that. And as it does this, does this whole rotation, then you're gonna just keep getting units added to a recruitment pool, to the summon pool. Now, you can get a lot of units over here. There is a cap on how many units you can keep on the pool, but over here, for instance, you start with two Plague Toads, a Beast of Nurgle, Nurglings, Plague Bearers, all that. So you do have certainly some significant power on the campaign. But when it comes to summoning a unit, well, let's just say we get these Toads, right? They're not going to start full HP. They're going to start about half HP when it comes down to it. Another problem is that it takes time for units to be summoned to the pool. So if you take too many casualties on the campaign, if you lose too many units, and it's very easy to lose demonic units that have low armor, then you might just flat out end up in a situation where you don't have units to recruit, and it's not like you have a large pool of regiments right now. Another issue is the cost of various things. Like, yeah, Nurglings can be pretty cheap. Everything else, not so much. Everything else can be ridiculously expensive. And it's not like we're talking about the faction that has a good economy. Nurgle does not have a good economy. Because these buildings, all of them, will start at a very low level of income. They can go all the way to 300, all well and good. Even 500 for some of these structures, but here's the problem. They're ridiculously expensive to actually build in the first place. So actually getting access to these good units is going to cost you an arm and a leg when it comes down to it. Like, look at this particular building, Jay, the Living Tree. It will cost you 10,000. So money is a major problem in a Nurgle campaign. You're weak in battle. Your units are not great in battle. You don't have really an economy to speak of, and you have some of the highest building costs from Tier 1. The idea, I suppose, was that when you get the building built, it's just you're gaining the full value potentially of that building chain. All well and good, but the problem is, of course, getting the money in the first place. It's not like you earn so much money from sacking settlements either. And on top of that, with Kugaf, he also starts near factions that are ideally suited to countering him. Like, because Helman Gorse can also regenerate his units in battle, can also recruit units from a global recruitment pool, and his units get major buffs in doing so. He also has a good economy and much cheaper units to deal with. Greasus himself is just a speed bump, but all the way to the north we have Grimgor, to the west we have Emmerich, to the east we have Cafe. You're in a really bad starting position as well. So it's this combination of issues, the poor economy, the poor start position, the enemies you have to deal with, that make Kugaf's campaign genuine misery to deal with. The cost of things is just too high, the benefits you get for doing so too low, the economy too weak. And the plagues, while beneficial, they're not going to make such a substantial enough difference to overcome the issues you're facing in this campaign. Finally, the worst legendary lord with the worst faction for the worst race in the game is Yuri, or the Demon Prince, or Daniel, that stupid name that Creative Assembly decided to use for him. What is his problem? Well, there are many. They are legion. He doesn't have a tech tree. He has a poor economy. He has all of the issues that the mono god factions have with none of the benefits. Like, Nakari has the diplomatic benefits, of course. Horn has at least one really good army and the ability to summon Blood Toasts. You don't get any of that, unfortunately. You don't get any of the benefits, you only have the downsides. You get the weak economy of the Demons of Chaos, with an economic building that starts at 500 and only generates 100 income. Your armies can be pretty expensive. You can make do if you're using, I guess, Marauders of Nurgle, which certainly can be pretty durable, like if you start with Nurgle. You do have some potential over here. You always get the structure that can generate you more income if you meet certain conditions, like over here, getting a substantial amount of income. Your prowess in battle is pathetic. Your casualty replenishment is weak. Your unit roster, you have every demonic unit, but you won't be able to afford any of them except the most basic ones. Because ultimately a campaign in Immortal Empires boils down to how much territory can you conquer if you're playing a faction at its full effectiveness. What that really boils down to is how many armies of effective units can you bring to bear on the enemy? How many battles can you take in a turn? How many settlements, how many regions can you take in a turn? How fast can you grow your economy? How many heroes can you have? How many lords can you afford? you barely can afford a single army if you're playing the Demon Prince, and then you're also going to start in the Cast Waste where you're going to struggle because of the issue of control. Because for control, you're using Cast on Divide the Corruption, but you start in a Nurgle province. Honestly, starting in North Skies, this faction might actually be better in Immortal Empires than it is currently. Because you're going to face constant rebellions and constant issues when you're playing as this particular faction. Your skill tree is also pretty weird, suffice it to say. Really weird, really odd, and not all that great. You don't really gain a significant amount of power for Yuri over here, for the Demon Prince, and there's a lot of things that just are annoying to get to. Most Legendary Lords, they get campaign movement range as one of their first skills, because it's an important skill. You have to spend quite a lot of points, 5 points, 5 skill points, in order to get it. You just have to start with this, get all of these, and then get a Rune Marcher. Actually, it's 6 skill points in order to be able to get to it. You are supposed to have body customization parts through the Demonic Glory. This replaces your research tree, but much of this isn't really that great to actually gain during the course of a campaign. There are certainly some benefits to be gained over here, but it's not really great, and you're always going to have to manage the glory aspect between that and just, like, let's say, sacking a settlement for income. So you've got a weak economy, a weak army roster, and you have none of the campaign benefits that other demonic factions have. Yuri, he's best forgotten. He's dead and forgotten. It's quite a shame too, because Creative Assembly really built up this guy in the marketing to be this incredible character, and then it's like he's the worst of the worst of the worst in the game. But that's just how these things happen. I think the demonic factions in general just need a lot more options. A better economy to begin with. Only Nakari has a decent economy, and that's because Nakari can trade, Nakari can get income from vassals, Nakari can get more money because of Slaaneshi corruption. You don't have that kind of luxury if you're playing any of the other demonic factions. And you're always constantly having to balance... like if you're playing Scarbrand, you always have to balance between sacking a settlement and raising it to the ground, because you can't do it in the same turn. If you're playing the Demon Prince, you have to worry about glory or sacking a settlement. So it isn't a pleasant campaign experience to deal with for any of these factions. The most playable one, I would call, the one that's probably the best, is Nakari, by far and away. But still, a really bad experience. Costine signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications, and I'll see you boys and girls next time.